I had a patient who, because I was Black, was not confident in my ability to care for them. But the kicker is, it was a Black person. And I said, "Are you uncomfortable?" And everything else. And she said, "How long have you been a nurse?" And I was like, at that point, over 20 years. "How long you been at this hospital?" I said, I think at that time I had been there like 5 years or something like that. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, I prefer, to have, a different nurse. And the supervisor was Caucasian. And so when I came out, she was like, this is strange. I've never had this before. And I said, what's going on? And she said, she wants a white nurse.
Wow. So how old was this woman?
Mid-40s. You would think,
Really?
Yes.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Coffee No Cream podcast. My name is Erin Braxton. I'm the host of the podcast. And here on Coffee No Cream, we share what I like to call Coffee No Cream moments. These are moments or things that happen to Black women in business just because they are Black women. Now, today's episode is really fun. It's an interesting conversation because the Coffee No Cream moment was pretty unexpected, all right? And let me just ask you guys, when you are looking for a medical professional practitioner, are you looking for a Black practitioner? Are you looking for a medical professional of color? I ask this because I recently had to have a fibroid removed, and I was referred a doctor. He was a Caucasian man, but I myself was like, you know what, in this climate, I felt like I couldn't trust it. I couldn't trust anyone. And I very much was like, I have to find a Black female doctor. And I've been like this for the past few years. I felt pretty strongly about it. I know everyone doesn't feel the same. I have a really close girlfriend of mine, and she's always like, why do you need to do that? Why do you need to do that? And everybody has their right to their own opinion to feel that way. But, I feel very strongly about it. For whatever reason, I felt led to find a Black female gynecologist, and I did. And I'm pretty certain a lot of Black women are feeling the same way right now because this woman is booked and busy. It was very hard to get into her. Everybody's trying to get into her. I actually found out another girlfriend of mine was trying to get in, and she was booked out about 6 months. And this has been the same across the board. Like when I was looking for a therapist, I was definitely looking for an African-American female. And I had one, she didn't work out. I had the next one, she's worked out well. Very much looking for that. Because in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, another African-American female understands the nuances of the culture. They will be gentler with me, more understanding with me. I don't have to think in the back of my mind that whether or not I'm being treated fairly or if things are being said to me in a certain way. Now, I'm not so pro-Black when it comes to medical professionals that I won't call out the foolishness, and I have had some foolishness happen, as you do with any profession. But I say that because my guest today, her name is Sheryl Davis. Sheryl has been a nurse for 30 plus years, okay, which is a long time. This girl has some experience as a nurse. And we became friends when I was in junior high, and we have remained friends the entire time ever since then. And Sheryl is like the most warm, beautiful person inside and out. She's very kind and loving. I mean, she gives the best hugs. She's such a good cheerleader when it comes to me. It's almost like girl, can you say something critical? Because I don't know if I even believe you anymore. But she's really a sweet, kind, wonderful human being. And I wanted to have somebody from the medical community on the show. And of course, we'll have more in the future. But Cheryl came to mind, and she's going to share with us a very interesting coffee no cream moment. I had no idea it was going to go this way, and sort of what she did and how she handled it. And as we do on Coffee No Cream, we start off over here, we end up over there, but it always makes for great, wonderful conversation. And that's exactly what happened when Cheryl and I got to talking on this episode. We learned about what it's like to be a nurse, some of the situations and things and obstacles that she's had to deal with as being a Black woman in the nursing profession. And then she reached way back and got a very interesting example of colorism that happened to her at the hands of a white supervisor when she was just starting out in her career. And Cheryl, being a lighter complected African-American person, wasn't the victim of it, but she certainly knew it was going on and has some interesting insight and an interesting story to tell on how she verified that this was indeed what was going on. So it was a really, really interesting conversation. I enjoyed it. Plus, I got a chance to hang out with an old friend. So before we get started, I want to ask that you guys please subscribe to the channel or to the podcast wherever you're listening. If you're watching, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. We've also just launched our new Facebook community. It's a private Facebook group where we can discuss and share. Everybody doesn't want to come on camera and talk about their racial instances or the biases and microaggressions that they experience as a Black woman. Everybody's not in a position to do that. People have jobs that they're trying to maintain. Everybody doesn't have the freedom. But in this private Facebook group, we can discuss it. We can talk about things. You can bring things to the group and discuss what's going on with you and perhaps get some tips, make some new connections, all the things. The link to the Facebook group is below or in the show notes if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I hope you join us there. And now it's time for the episode. So you guys, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you over there. Welcome, Cheryl. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. And you?
I am so good to have you here, my longtime friend.
Yes.
So I just gave a little introduction about you, told people how we met, how we know each other, but tell the people what it is you do every day and just give them a little information.
Well, I am a licensed professional nurse, and I've been in nursing over 30 plus years now. I kind of started from the bottom, as a tech and worked my way up. And, nursing, you're everything. You're the nurse, you're the counselor, you're the friend, kind of setting the tone for everything and the outcomes of a person's stay. So
I'm so excited that you're on because you're the first person that I've had on in the medical field. And we do hear so many things that go on all the time with patients and medical providers and medical professionals. So I'm really excited to hear what your coffee no cream moment is that you're going to share with us because, we are the same age. So I know you have more than one, but I want to hear what you're talking about, what you have to tell us is your coffee no cream moment so we can kind of unpack it and get into it. So Cheryl, tell us what your coffee no cream moment is.
Well, as I've looked at all of, the different examples and everything else, I think healthcare is, how should I say, it's a different beast because you go into somebody's personal space. So everything is based on a person's perception. All of their biases come out and all of that. So I'm going to talk about my name first, because I know on other podcasts that you had, everybody talked about their name. My name is Sheryl Davis, and you would think that's just an everyday common name, but depending on who my consumer is, is how I introduce myself. When I go in, and it's so funny, if I go in and say, hi, I'm Cheryl, if I have, white consumers, a lot of times they'll say Cheryl, and I'm like, yeah. And sometimes they'll say, how do you spell that? And I'm like, Cheryl, Sheryl. If I go into a black consumer and I say, hi, I'm Cheryl, they're like, Cheryl. I'm like, Cheryl. Do you see the difference?
Well, I would think that, okay, this is interesting because as long as I've been knowing you, I've never thought about this. Okay, so, okay, white people say Cheryl.
Yes, if I
Black
say
people say
Cheryl,
Cheryl.
if I say Cheryl, it's really Cheryl. I'm like, Cheryl. And I'm like, Shirley without the L-Y, Cheryl. And they're like, how do you spell that? If I say, hi, I'm Cheryl, black people are like, Cheryl. And I'm like, Cheryl. Like Cheryl the Pearl.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so fun. I never thought about that with your name.
But
I don't know any. I don't know any white people that pronounce
and it's
Cheryl.
and I always will come out to my counterparts and say, because it was news to me. I'm like, why is this so hard for people? Do I sound different? What is it? Why are they like Cheryl? How do you spell that? And I'm like, Cheryl.
Cheryl.
Cheryl. Oh.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, Cheryl. If I say Cheryl, and I'm talking to my black consumers, they're like, Cheryl. I'm like, Cheryl.
I digress, but when I was in college, this guy, older white Jewish man from New York, he's like, is your name Erin or is it Aaron? And I'm like, what? I'm like, it's Erin. He's like, Aaron? I'm like, oh my God, yeah, whatever,
right,
sir. But I didn't realize, so people from New York will say Aaron, but I just say Aaron.
Right.
So,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Okay, but I digress. Keep going. Coffee, no cream.
The one thing that comes to mind is I had a patient who, because I was black, was not confident in my ability to care for them. But the kicker is, it was a black person, plastically conditioned, I guess they are the notion that if it's white, it's right. Everything that I came in, tried to do for the patient, questioned. How long you been a nurse? How long you been doing this? What school you go to? And everything else. But, and she even went further to say she wanted a white nurse.
Okay, back up. So you go in, you're in a hospital setting or you're in the office, like a
hospital
practice. Okay.
Yes.
So you're assigned these people. I don't know how they do it, like how you get assigned to your patients, but you're assigned.
It is arbitrary. You come in to work and, they have the assignments made out depending on what your specialty is. I work at a rehab hospital. And so my specialty is brain injury, all things brain injury, from strokes, aneurysms, assaults, accidents. And the other floors are for amputees and spinal cord injury. And then we have heart failure, that type of thing. So depending on what your specialty is, usually, unless they have staffing issues, you're on your floor. And so other than that, it's based on, I guess, a nursing grid or staffing pattern, how many patients you have. Today you might have 5, tomorrow you might have 6. On a bad day, somebody call in, you might have 9,
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you go in to see this patient and tell us what happened. Like, how did it go?
Immediately, you go in, hi, I'm Cheryl, welcome, if they're a new patient or, you just introduce yourself and let them know, I'm your nurse caring for you tonight. And from the beginning, you could just tell by the way she looked at you. So how long have you been here? What are you working on? Those type of things. just trying to break the ice and everything. Because, I know their history and everything else, but part of your neurological assessment is your memory and things like that. So you can do a lot of assessment on conversation. Do they know where they are? Do they know the date? Do they know the time? Do they know the setting, that type of thing? And she was just looking at me like, and and I said, "Are you uncomfortable?" And everything else. And she said, "How long have you been a nurse?" And I was like, at that point, over 20 years. How long you been at this hospital? I said, I think at that time I had been there like 5 years or something like that. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, I just, I prefer, to have, a different nurse. And I was like, well, is something wrong with, what's going on? This is my first time having you. If you have some concerns, let me know. Did something happen, everything else? And she was like, no, just let me talk to the supervisor. And I said, it's better in those situations not to press the patient. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, why do you want to see the supervisor and all sorts of stuff? It's like, that's fine. Sure, I'll go get the supervisor and everything else. And ultimately, she wanted a white nurse.
So you found this out after the supervisor told you after their conversation? Because you were out of the room?
Yes. So, of course, after the supervisor came in and talked to the patient, I was standing by because I knew that I had never had the patient before. And, like what could I have gone awry within the first, 5-10 minutes of having the patient? And the supervisor was Caucasian. And so when I came out, she was like, this is strange. I've never had this before. And I said, what's going on? And she said, she wants a white nurse.
Wow. Okay, I have to ask. You're in there dealing with brain injury. I mean, without violating HIPAA, we don't know who this person is, but were they mentally in the right place? I'm just curious, because,
she presented so,
okay.
She was able to, she knew, person, place, situation, it wasn't like she was, disoriented or anything like that. But brain injury, you do have to take into account sometimes, depending on what portion of the brain is affected. Some people do get caught in sort of a time, situation where they can't remember present time, or either their long-term memory is the best. Their short-term memory is not. But I don't think that was the situation.
So how old was this woman?
Mid-40s. You would think,
Really?
Yes. If it had been somebody in their 80s, I wouldn't have even taken it personal, because you have to consider somebody's life experience,
Wow.
That's just like, I can have a patient in their 80s that will call you gal. And I don't take it personal, but some of my counterparts will be like, yeah, let's call me gal. And I'm like, he's 80, you know what I'm saying? Or, he's from, Podunk, depending on what area they were raised in. They weren't raised in the city. They were raised out in the country or something like that. I'm like, everybody's life experience is different. It's not personal or whatnot. I wouldn't let it slide if they called me the N-word, and sometimes that does happen, or they'll call you colored.
Yeah, that's way old.
Right.
This is so interesting because I didn't know what you were going to say, right? We just, we know each other. I'm like, hey, come on the podcast. I didn't do any I didn't know. Okay. So, and this has come up like in other in other ways. I gave
Right.
the story on was it it was 2 podcast episodes ago where we were talking about, working with other Black women and how that tends to be a challenge with Black on Black, right? And I got one comment. She didn't like my story, and that's fine, right? Like, it's a hard conversation to have. It's a hard conversation to have because, again, I'm here to uplift other Black women, right? And however we can do that, that's what I want to do, right? But part of that conversation is we have to have hard conversations. We have to talk about
Absolutely.
where we fall short. And this is absolutely crazy to me, especially as somebody who's recently had, I'll just tell everybody, I had a fibroid removed, and I was specifically looking for a Black
Absolutely.
practitioner.
Absolutely.
I was specifically just really because of the political climate. I think in years past, I've always had white doctors. My mom had us at wherever, we just didn't have that many Black doctors
Exactly.
where I grew up. Yeah. So I always had white doctors and never thought a thing about it. But for some reason, when they told me, yeah, we need to go in and see what's up and get this thing out, I was like, so no disrespect, no shade.
It was, surprising to me because now what I see all the time in nursing, nursing is very diverse. We have people from all different areas of the world, a lot of Filipinos, a lot of, Africans representing different countries. And it's very common to see people have a problem with having a nurse that is not American, especially with the African countries, you know what I'm saying? Because especially if they have an accent, the way that they are spoken to by, I don't want to, stereotype, all white people, but, a lot of times it's the white people, you know what I'm saying, that, if they have an accent, they treat them like they are, less than or something like that. And I always try to use it as a time to educate them that a lot of times when people from other countries come here, they are overly educated, in their home countries. Like, we have nurses that are nurses in the United States because the United States won't recognize that they were a doctor, in their home country.
Yeah, I've heard of that. And, as Americans in general, right? And you can even, like, this is not Black, this is not white, because I listen to my family members say some real ignorant stuff when it comes to people from other places. And I just think that might be due just to lack of exposure or the exposure to, cross, sideways media and things like that. But just as somebody who has been trying to learn Spanish since 1986, okay, and still have not mastered the language, I have so much
Absolutely.
respect for anybody who can come over here and not just learn to speak the language, but be a professional speaking that language. And I think it's a mass, or it's a huge, I don't know my word, but it's just like ignorance to assume that these people who have learned a completely different language and the words for like medicine in that language, I just think that's crazy. But it's very common because we are over here,
Right.
We're America. Like, people think that we're the end all be all, and if you just step outside of these borders, there's so much more going on. But that's a whole nother conversation. I want to go back to when the supervisor came out and told you that this happened to you. I mean, what were your thoughts about it? I mean, what did you think? I mean,
being in nursing has taught me a lot. So I didn't take it personal. I know that, unfortunately, It's like a generational curse. Some of us think if it's white, it's right. You know what I'm saying? That, just don't have any confidence. It's like self-hatred.
Yeah.
So I didn't
Yeah.
take it personal. But it was funny to me because it just dumbfounded the supervisor. She was like, I've seen, white people before, question, what I'm saying, if they have, but I've never seen this. And I kind of took the moment to explain it to her. It's just like
Yeah.
in business where some black people don't support, black business because they feel like we are inept or, not going to get the same quality of service, from your own people. It's unfortunate. So I didn't take it personal.
Yeah, I've talked about that. I've experienced that. But this is crazy because, when you start the story, you expect it to go a different way. And, yeah. Okay.
It,
So have you,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry. No, I was just going to say, have you had it happen with a white patient
Oh,
too?
yes. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Um, and in both instances, I've been in nursing so long that I tend to be a reference for newer nurses to the particular job. Maybe, I've been there, 5, 6 years, they've only been there new. So, and I have a particular skill set. So, but in both situations, the nurse that they requested could not do something or provide something for me. And they were like, wait, let me just go get another nurse. And they came and had to come get me. And so, it was my sort of, victorious moment that I'm like, yeah, you didn't want me. But when the nurse that you requested couldn't, do something, they had to come get me. And so, then I get to kind of just show out.
And that's awesome. I mean, like, you get to live out the revenge fantasy that we all, it's really what that is. Do you, this happened with the white patients, not the black woman. With the black woman, whatever happened with her, like, that just was that, you just got moved to somebody else?
You know, we, I didn't, from that point on, I told them, I said, you might as well, um, but the supervisor is saying, we're not going to always be able to do this. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't know, who's, scheduled to work on a particular day. She was like, she was more offended, I think, by it than me. She was like, this is foolishness. You know what I'm saying? I'm not. And she really wanted to like assign her all black nurses, like, no, she gonna, and I said, it's just we live in such a litigious society, you know what I'm saying? She's gonna start trying to find reasons, and scrutinize everything they do or either make a complaint that is not worth it. If you have a white nurse, give her what she wants. And then, I'm sort of like, it's one less headache for me or another nurse. Like, you don't want the same thing with a patient. If a white nurse says they don't want a black nurse, back in the day, I would take it personally and feeling like I had to prove myself or prove my skill set or something or change their narrative. Sometimes you just can't change the way that a person
No.
has been raised, been taught, or, their biases or so I'm like,
And
okay, you don't want me, that's fine. It's I don't internalize it.
I was talking to my dad about, working with black folks and stuff like that. That black on black thing. And he just said, as an 81-year-old person from Mississippi, he was just like, yeah, that runs deep. Like, you can't change that.
Totally.
You can't change that. And there's nothing you can do to, don't even, he appreciates, a podcast, and a conversation, but that generation, they're just like,
Right.
they just, resolve to deal with it, and that's just the way it is, right? And it does run deep. You know, the fact that you're saying this is a 40 some odd year old person, and this was this when we were in our 40s, or
Yes.
were we? Yeah, so that's just crazy. Like Gen X,
Yes,
that's crazy,
exactly.
right?
That you would, you have this seasoned nurse, that has been in the field for, decades, but you'd prefer to have someone of a certain color come in, and she could have been, 6 months out of nursing school, but because she had a certain skin color, you feel like you must know more or be more professional or.
And I know this isn't always true, but when you have the opportunity to have a nurse or a practitioner who looks like you, one might assume, and I know this isn't always true, that there would be even more concern and care because perhaps that person would see you as their family member, right?
Exactly.
I mean, just even like within my business, I currently have a Black assistant, and I've had multiple assistants. This is the first Black assistant. Well, no, I tried to have one way back when. It didn't work out, but I feel like my assistant is more loyal to me, and maybe even me to her. I hate to say this, but because she's loyal to me and works so hard for me, I truly believe a lot of it is a Black thing. I believe that when I had other ethnicities of assistant, they didn't give a shit. They didn't care, like this girl does. That's just, it's not even an apples to apples comparison, but I do feel when you are working with people who look like you, there is a level of understanding, there is a level of care that cannot be equated to working with other ethnicities. I'm not saying that other white people, other brown people can't do a wonderful, beautiful job. I just think that's really interesting for somebody who's so young to feel this way about working with you, So
I have also gotten where, and I don't even feel like, I know on other podcasts you have talked about how properly you talk. I have never felt like I know I speak well. My mother demanded it,
You do.
but I've never felt like I, was overly, had a proper way of speaking. But to other Black people, I've heard them say, they'll ask me, especially St. Louis, where did you go to school? Where did you grow up? And if I say where I went to school, they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, but that's not where I was raised. Just
Right.
because, I went to school, with a, more white population because I was a product of, desegregation, busing program. I'm like, that's not where I was raised. Or if they'll say, just, St. Louis, that's how we are. Where were you
Yeah.
raised? Well, and I tell them what area of St. Louis I raised in. They don't believe, what street, and everything.
Right.
And I'm like,
And
that's sad that just because you speak well or the way that you carry yourself, that people are so willing to stereotype you, and it's, we are all, I guess, I definitely think that I'm a product of how I was, the area that I was raised and everything. I think every experience that I have had shapes me and makes me who I am. And I'm proud of everything. But people are just ignorant, and not ignorant to be condescending, ignorant meaning they just don't know any better.
I think the proper way of speaking, there's levels to it. I was raised, we went to high school together, so I was raised where you went to school. Black people tend to have this issue with some with
Right.
each other. Maybe it's, I hate to say anything, right? Because it could be perceived wrong. Sometimes
You're you're
it's,
you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
yeah,
Yes.
sometimes it's envy, right? Sometimes it's a lot of things, right? I had my share of problems, as more and more will be revealed as the podcast continues, being out there with primarily white people. But, Black people haven't been the kindest, especially when we were young,
Right.
about the way I speak. Um, and this is truly, I call it my first language, right? Because, my mom didn't used to want me to go down in the city. When we would want to go down there, Candy and I would be trying to go down and get into trouble and find little Black boys, because she didn't think I could make the switch, which, you learn how to make
Right.
when you get older. Still not as good as other Black people can do, like but you learn, right? And this is truly, I truly talk like this. Like, it is not forced. It is just truly the way that I speak.
Absolutely.
But if you heard my dad, you'd be like, wow, right? And so I remember being at the hair salon with my mom, and this woman, she was so ignorant. And sometimes I just, I was so young and I just didn't have the words. And you know how you wish you could dial the clock back and
Absolutely.
just say things as your older self. And this woman, my mom wasn't there. Like, she had left me there. And we were always at the beauty salon, hair
Exactly.
salon, because my mom was, really close with my my hairstylist. And this woman says to me, it's good that you speak proper and everything like that, but you just, you take it too far. You don't have to take it that far.
Like you putting on. Yeah.
I'm like, you ignorant. Like, I wanted, but she just was ignorant, right? And if I were, I was probably like 13, 14 at the time. And, I was met with the ignorance of that comment, of that statement, was just so shocking. It's like, my little young self, I didn't know what to say. I mean, I know what I would say now.
Right.
Right. But, people are ignorant, people still, I think, judge me, especially people we went to school with, right? It's different now. We've all grown up and matured, but
Well, some of us have grown up and matured. Some people are just stuck where they are.
Stuck where they
That's
are.
what's good about travel, and that's what's good about, I always say, going to college and things like that, because it opens you up to things that you would not, if you're in your own community or, ghetto per se. And ghetto not being a negative connotation. A ghetto is, the people that you live with that are common to you, you know what I'm saying, and have the same, background and all of that. You don't see the differences when you go to, or the biases and everything else, because even people of color, we have biases. I like to call it kitchen table talk, especially when I'm correcting, the younger, nurses and techs that come in, now I'm of a certain age, so I'm more of the auntie and the mama. And when they are talking out of turn or talking something that is exclusively to us, I politely pull them to the side and say, no, ma'am,
Yeah.
this is something that you speak of when you don't have ears around you, and stuff like that. That's just like, one of my pet peeves are the fact that, people that use the N word, it was always, my mother would not tolerate it, because she said when we use it and use it so loosely that then they think it's okay. You know what I'm saying? So when we'll be at work and they'll just be talking, water cooler talk, and they'll drop that word and it's an earshot of somebody, I'm like, get over here. You know what I'm saying? Like, are you crazy? You know what I'm saying? Now you sitting here using it loosely and commonly and everything else. I said, then, when they call you out of your name, or something like that, don't get mad because you opened that door. Some things you should never open the door to. It should never, or feeling like it's certain parts of our culture that this should only be shared with our culture. And
I think
I think the N word is, me giving a real in your face. It's not always, it don't have to be that, it's other, little commonalities or subtleties. The same way when they come in, I'm like, perception is reality. We still live in, even my hair, for instance, my hair. I have natural hair, and I've had natural hair now for 20 years almost. And even in nursing, when I first started going natural, a lot of people told me, it's like my mother. My mother was like, you have to be careful with that because your ability to get a job or your earning potential might be affected by the way that I choose to wear my hair. And when I first started growing my locks, if I had an interview, I'd wear a wig.
Really?
Yes.
I did post some research about that, and keep talking.
Now we have the Crown Act or whatnot, but not everybody recognizes the Crown Act. A job, when you sign a contract with a job and they have set forth their own policies and procedures and everything, once you sign that contract, that relieves them of any liability of like something like the Crown Act. Hospitals always had, you couldn't wear unnatural, hair colors. Like, so if you were black and you had blonde hair, they would tell you, you have to change your hair because they felt like that is not a natural hair color for black people, or some of the auburns or reds. They're like, if that color does not grow naturally out of your scalp, that color, they would not, they would tell you had to change your hair color. Especially with natural styles, especially the women that wear like a natural or an afro. Not everybody knows that, that's what our culture would call an afro. It was called a natural. Our own mothers back in the day, you wouldn't dare. You were in that kitchen on a Saturday getting that hair pressed or getting a relaxer
Absolutely.
or whatnot, wearing your hair in little afro puffs or no, your hair wasn't combed. And that's still the perception to some. They feel like if your hair is natural, it's unkept. Even now, with my hair, in twist, locks, and everything else, when I go to get my hair done, it's some styles that I might like or I might get when I'm on vacation or I'm off, but it still, in my mind, is not appropriate for work because of how it's going to be perceived.
Yeah.
And me, I stress not having like new growth or something like that because to certain populations that perceives unkept or unclean.
Right.
We just, even in 2026 almost, still fighting those same, generational curses.
Yeah, I definitely would not have been comfortable going natural when I went natural. I was working for myself, so I was not in an office. But yeah, and I'm not a risky hair person, like I don't do, but that was risky to me, like because I have very textured hair. I don't have like loose, 3C curls or whatever. I don't have loose straight curls. I mean, my stuff is coily coarse, I made it work, I was just like, I made it work and I feel like found my personality and rocked it. But I for sure wouldn't have been as comfortable, especially just starting out, like coming from that TWA phase and
Absolutely.
then trying to like grow it into something. And if my mom were here, so my mom's been gone since 1998. She never was a fan when I would want to cut my hair because, you know, once I decided I liked short hair on me, I was always cutting it. I wanted it short, short, short. And she'd say, you should let it grow out. And I'd be like, whatever. You know, I wasn't trying to hear that. But I always wonder, I told my dad this one time, I was like, I wonder what mommy would say if, you know, I always think that if my mom woke up from the dead right now and saw the world or saw me and my sister or saw us,
Absolutely.
what would she say? And I say to my dad, it's like, I wonder what she would say about my hair. I don't think she would like it. And he's like, no, you don't know that. This is what he said. He said, you don't know that. Styles have changed.
Absolutely.
She would change. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. She would, because she was stylish, you know, but she was not. She talked about my hair. It was an issue. It was an issue. I mean, it was an issue for me getting my hair done because, you know, my sister Erica, you know, my sister Erica, for those of you guys who wouldn't know who that is, a sister named Erica, an older sister. And Erica's hair is smoother. It's softer. It's straighter.
Right.
And mine is
And some
not.
people, you know, even in our culture, think that straighter is better. You know, that quote unquote good hair. Yeah.
I do not have what one would call good hair. So like when people are gluing their baby hairs down with gel and all that, my hair doesn't do that. I don't
Right.
even try to do that, right? But my sister could just brush her stuff up with some conditioner. I can't do that, right? Same two parents. We just
Exactly.
not have the same hair, you know, but so it was always an issue in our household. They would, you know, my mom would, you know, I'm not going to say what she would say, but it wasn't good when talking about my hair. So I had to decide and fall in love with my hair, you know, and even, as recently as I guess 2 weeks ago when I got these braids in, my friend, he kept going on about really liking the braids, really liking the braids. Oh my gosh, you should play around with braids. You should always get them in different styles. That's because he doesn't
Yeah.
like my natural hair.
Right.
That's all that is, right? He does not like my natural hair. I didn't say anything. I was like, all right, yeah. My old boss, I say this all the time, and when I decided to go gray, I don't know if I ever told you this. He said, there's no more dick for you. That's what he said. No more dick for you. I've
wait.
never
Why I clutch my
been
pearls.
stopped. Yeah,
Amazing.
he said, and I was just like, right? And I said, oh, I'm going to make it hot. It's
Right.
not hot. I was
Yes.
like, all right, I'm going to make it hot. I have never been stopped
No.
in my life more
You know,
than by young men, by women, by young black
for
men.
sure.
I have never been stopped more in my life. There is not, you know, and I'm not always out and about, but pretty much all the time somebody's stopping me about my hair. So it just goes to show you, you know, we
Right.
have self-hate about these
Totally.
things, you know. My own family would have made me hate my hair, right? Because it was, you know, we got to get this stuff relaxed. You know, my mom would talk about it, you know, being, you know, she would call it nappy. She would say things, and she didn't mean. I wasn't offended, I guess, but it affects you,
You know
right?
what you
So
know.
fast forward, yeah, I had a
Didn't know any
relaxer for
better.
30 years,
Right.
yeah, and then so I had to get used to looking at myself with the hair. And I had to become comfortable with it. And even though people still say things like my friend, love him to death, but I know that's all the braid love was really because he doesn't like it, you know, and that's fine. You know, I'm
You know,
50
it
years old.
depends
I just
on, you
don't
know,
care.
our black. If I get some of the older, you know, black women, sometimes they don't like my hair. You know what I'm saying? Like you young people, all of y'all, you know what I'm saying? And it's just, that's all they know. White people, they are just fascinated It's always, is that all of your hair? Really? And they want to take a closer look and, they want to touch it.
Yeah.
And you know how we are about so why do you
I don't get a lot of people trying to touch my hair.
I'm surprised,
it's funny.
especially when you wear it in its natural state. You know what I'm saying? I'm surprised they're not, can I touch it? You know what I'm saying? They're like, it's like they want to put their fingers into your scalp. You know what I'm saying? They want to get to the scalp and see the. And it's
Some people do. My friend, I call my gay boyfriend, he does. He always would want to touch it. And the reason I would be like, no, don't touch no, is because, when you're wearing a wash and go, as I do, it's, it's usually wet or gel, gooey,
or,
until it's
you
not.
have found that perfect, you know what I'm saying? Where you, after you pull and, you know what I'm saying, and, swish it to the side and everything else, you've got it right where it needs to be. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Don't mess with
Get your
perfection.
hands out of it.
Right. No. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So no. Yeah.
But I don't get a ton of people trying to touch. One time, this is crazy. One time I went to see Cyndi Lauper. Somebody invited me to see Cyndi Lauper at the Greek Theater.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, get into the Greek. We were at the Greek Theater when I lived in LA, and I had my hair in a puff. I was pretty new natural, maybe like a year in. I don't know if the guy behind me, white guy, was he must have been on ecstasy. He must have been on something, because he'd be like, can I touch your hair? And I'd be like, all right, yeah, you can. It didn't bother me. He was behind us. And all through the concert, every single few minutes, he would just reach over and touch it. So, when they say, when you're on ecstasy, they say,
he's tweaking
that, yeah, you want to touch things.
Right.
And I was just like, what is wrong with this dude? And finally, my friend, she was Puerto Rican. She's like, Jesus, man. She whipped around. She was so pissed. But even when we left, we were all filing out, and I was waiting on one of my friends to come out of the bathroom. And this guy came up and he just kept squeezing. But that's the only time. I don't really have a lot of people try to come at me. I have a lot of people ask me. I had a woman come up to me. I was in Marshall's, black woman. And this is just the language. She looks at me. I'm walking by. I have a bunch of candles in my arms. I'm walking by. And she looks at me and she's like, is that you? And I just look at her. I'm like, yeah, it's me. And she was like, it's you? I was like, yeah, it's me. And then she was like, okay. And then we walked off. But she was talking about my hair. I knew what she was talking about. It was just this weird exchange. I
love it when
it was hilarious.
We can be subtle. Yeah, we get to the point. I've seen comedians say the way that we compliment each other. Yeah, we get up like, I see you. You know what I'm saying? All right, polka dot.
Yep. And
exactly.
And as soon as every time somebody compliments me, I go back to the guy who said, no more dick for you.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, oh, I got a compliment. I'll be texting him. I'll be like, oh, got another compliment. And he'll be like, did I have a penis? I'm like,
and see,
okay, right?
That is what you just gave example of is what I was saying is kitchen table talk. That was her code for, I'm talking to, our people. Is that you? You know what I'm saying? Or whatever, without, getting into specific. Is that a weave? Is that and stuff like that. And so.
And not rude about it.
Exactly.
Just totally like in the moment. Just,
Right.
But I don't think we're offended when another black person or woman asks us about our hair. We're like, most of us are not trying to gatekeep. Like if it's a wig or if it's a weave, I don't think most would have a problem. I don't wear weave. This is the closest I'll get to an extension probably, unless something happens and I need to. But I don't think I would be offended. I would be flattered if somebody didn't know who was black and they asked this of me. I'd be like, oh girl, this is, I got this and this is all, I'd be more than happy. But it's a different response when it comes from somebody who's non-black.
Yes. I try to use every moment as a teachable moment. And it's a work in progress. I'm not who I used to be. The things that even professionally that I used to wear close to my sleeve. When somebody says something, I just try to give grace and mercy, and I'm always going to try to find the best way to represent me. And when I say me, it's the people that look like me, to give a different perception. And sometimes it is tiring, feeling like you always have to be the gatekeeper, and stuff like that. Because, I've had, I go in, and when you give exceptional care to people that don't look like you, I've had people say, they're giving you a compliment, but it's sort of a backhanded compliment. You have just been so great, and and so knowledgeable, and the way that you, and I could be like, well, what were you expecting? Or why? But you just take it for what it is. And I always say, it's my pleasure to serve, because it's a service industry. And I tell them, I don't see my job as a job. It's a ministry, you know what you're going into. Nursing, you're like one step away from being the housemaid. Historically,
that's interesting, because
the nurse, when you get the nurse, you were going into the field, you were going, or whatnot. It was like you were the maid and the nurse. And it's just generationally, we have slowly evolved, and it's very slow. And that's what, you think about what you do, even though I administer medication and, dialogue with doctors about disease processes and things like that. But I also, I'm bathing, I'm changing, I'm rolling, you in somebody's personal space, and stuff like that. And so that's how they perceive you. And that's fine.
So I have a question, because aside from teaching, nursing, and I don't have the exact research on this, but I believe it to be true, is one of the oldest professions Black women have been able to participate in. We were nurses or we were teachers. Mm-hmm. And I'm interested because, still tons of Black nurses. So there's got to be all these different coffee, no cream moments or things that happen to Black women in this profession. Do you feel like you still see, aside, from what you've shared with us today, a lot of these types of things that happen to Black women because they're Black women in the nursing profession?
Yes. And it's just sad, because you still will see things based on not just being Black, but the color of your skin, your ability to be promoted. Sometimes could be something as simple as skin color. Blacks mm-hmm. and whites, I'm not going to just say whites, Blacks and whites are still very color struck. The darker your skin is, they weaponize your skin color. That's just like, for instance, Barack Obama. If Barack Obama was a dark-skinned Black man, I promise you he would not have been president.
Definitely not.
And
Definitely
it's the same way.
Or if Kamala, if she wasn't, biracial, sure. Light-skinned or whatever, she wouldn't have been a vice president.
Yes, and you see how they, found every opportunity to crucify the first lady because she was darker skinned. Calling her
a man.
Animalistic things. Oh, she looks like an ape. That type of stuff. It's the same way
right.
In nursing when you are trying to be promoted to, or I'm not just going to say nursing, healthcare. When you're trying to move up to management and, CEO positions and stuff like that. Yeah. If you have, sometimes if your skin is too dark, not to say you can't get there, but it will be much harder. Same thing, the perception of the patient. You know, there have been times also where a darker skinned nurse will have a harder time, you know, providing care to a patient, but they seem to be more comfortable with me because even though me and you debate this all the time, you know, as if I'm light skinned or not, because I don't think I am, you know, but when you have darker
please,
skin.
if you are listening to this, if you are in the comments at all and you want to make a comment, I wanted this to come up. If you believe Cheryl is not light skinned, okay, please comment, please. She's delusional. She's delusional.
We will have to agree to disagree because I do not think that I am light skinned. But again, you know, if you
okay.
You know, perception is reality, and it's all based on your own experiences. I can give a quick little anecdote, you know what I'm saying, that was, you know, just something that I never thought I would experience. It's a professional situation, but prior to being a nurse, while I was in nursing school, I used to work in hospitality. I used to work in a hotel here in St. Louis, and I worked the front desk. So because I went to school during the day, I would come in the evening, and I had problems with other Black front desk attendants because whenever I would come to work, and this was back when in order to work the front desk at a hotel, you had to be glammed up. You had to have that. It was in your contract. You had to have a made up face. You could not come barefaced. You had to have on makeup, you know, the way that we wore our uniform, all of that, you know. You know, everything now is so simplistic. You know, it might be a T-shirt with a logo, but no, back then we had on blazers, we had on, you know, a scarf, that type of thing. So I came in the evening. No matter when I came to work, the general manager would pull someone off the front desk and put me up there. And I never knew why. You know, I was young. I was in my early 20s. And I heard one of my counterparts say, you know, she was darker than me. And she said, oh, light skinned ass every time she come in, you know, the general manager putting her up front. And I was like, what? Because front desk and reservations work together. So when I heard her say this, it really hurt my feelings. And I was like, what? That is not, you know what I'm saying? I don't have anything to do with that. So the next day that I came in, I went to the general manager. I said, I can work reservations. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to, you know, she's been there all day. She don't have to count her drawer down. And he said, no, you're going out front. And I said, why? You know what I'm saying? And I kind of pulled him to the side. He was a white man. And I said, you know, she has a problem with she's been here all day or whatever. He said, come here, let me tell you something. He said, I am in the business of making money. And said, she can take her dark self and he said this to me. He said she can take her dark self back to reservations. Nobody wants, if it comes down to looking in your face and her face, they want to see you. So yes, every time you come to work, you going out front.
Okay, first of all, that's crazy, right? Why
And she was
did
beautiful.
he feel like he could? Yeah, I'm sure, but why did he feel like he could say this to you? What made him so comfortable to say this to you? Like, we know they think this way. We get it. And we're bad enough amongst ourselves, right? But that is, wow. And so you said.
I said, you know, I don't want to have a problem. You know what I'm saying? I kind of glazed over. You know, I was young and dumb. I was stunned.
Yeah.
Not wanting to say, but then also, you know, for my own preservation. You know what I'm saying? This is the GM. You know, I still want my job or whatever. So, but I was like, you know, I don't want anybody to feel like I'm taking their spot. I said, you know, this is what I heard them say. And he said, is she right? She's right. He's all like, so yeah, when you come in, you know, you are going out front and she going to back.
Wow.
Yes,
Like
and
house slave, field slave stuff.
again, in my opinion, you know what I'm saying? She was beautiful. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we were like, this was a day where, like I said, we all had to be made up and, prim and proper and everything else. And she was, just as beautiful. She was, starched and ironed and, all pristine and everything else. The only thing that was different about us was the color of our skin. And because of that, you know what I'm saying? He felt like that, I represented. He's, the look that he wanted represented out front. And same way in nursing.
Well,
if you like
I
skin,
told you.
everything being commonplace, us, even education, experience, all of that, sitting next to each other, one lighter, one darker. You know what I'm saying? If you up for promotion or something like that, it may come down to something like that.
Well, as I said, and the white man has told you now, you are light skinned. I have to say. Oh my God.
That's 'cause he
This
doesn't
is
know any better.
crazy. No, I know, but black people don't know any better either. So many times, like how many times have listen, as a dark skinned girl, I get it. Like I've got stories for days and you just are like, why? Oh my gosh. And that's what it is. But
I don't
it's
understand
really hard.
it. My mother and my sister are darker complected, you know what I'm saying? And of course, I think they're two of the most beautiful women I've ever seen, you know what I'm saying? Just like you. And I've known you now at this point longer than I haven't. You know what I'm saying?
That's true. Yes.
And, I think that you are amazingly beautiful,
I know. Cheryl's a good cheerleader.
So I didn't have the benefit of, and when I see colorism, I don't understand it because I'm like, black is black. You know what I'm saying? Doesn't matter, what color is.
Yeah.
But I also, when I was younger and didn't know any better, when somebody was mixed, you know what I'm saying? It was like, well, they black, but her mama white.
Yeah, that mixed conversation, that's a whole nother conversation too. Because they're in the internet community. I don't even want to dig too far deep into that.
Absolutely.
Because
I mean, yeah, the branches, you know what I'm saying, will take life. You know what I'm saying? One thing, will lead into this and that and everything. But yes.
I have a friend who, she's black and she's a beautiful girl. She's very fair complected, that curly hair model. And she took, her DNA ancestry or whatever. And I remember one time she says to me, Erin, I'm darker than a mixed person. I was like, where? Why do you think that? No, you're not. Like, come on. Like, she's like, yes, I am. I was like, but she's not. She could easily be, look mixed. I mean, what is it? Jordan and Peele, aren't both of them mixed? And I wouldn't have thought so. Mixed people come out any sort of way. Right. So she goes on to get her ancestry done. And I think it comes up like she does it. And even though she's black and her parents are black, they're all just very light-skinned people, very fair complected, going on back for generations, right? So they're just light-skinned folks,
Creole people,
mating with each other.
Yeah,
mating with each other, right? And she comes back with a 56% African American versus, and so she's so happy about it. Like I heard, what's her name? Ava DuVernay, same thing. Like I'm more black than I am, she's like, and I made a joke. I said, you probably take your DNA and you probably are about 50-50. And then she's like, I actually did. And I'm like 56%. And I was like laughing. But what she said which was interesting. She's like, well, am I coffee? Would I be able to be on your podcast?
Bless her heart.
I don't know if I'm considered coffee.
Well, I guess that you would have to pose the question. Is it about being black or the black experience?
Right. And, I want my guests, and I don't want her to feel lesser than as a Black person because I consider her Black. And does she even have any coffee no cream moments? We haven't even talked about it, but she said that to me, and I was like, oh wow, that's an interesting statement. But I want to, have Black women on who can share their experiences being a Black woman,
I'm sure
and she
they
would
do
qualify.
because our mixed
Yes.
counterparts. We first of all we didn't establish our people did not establish that one drop of cream in the coffee makes you coffee. That came from generations ago. Because of the fact that most likely you were the slave owner's child. You know what I'm saying? So the whole negativity and I guess, how should I say, the salaciousness of it, so you're not accepted by the Black, people in the field because you the master's kid, you know what I'm saying? And they looking at you like you white. So you're not going to be treated like us and everything else as the same way, the master's family, you slept with the help, and generations later, it's the same thing. I'm sure they have every story saying, for the Black people, they weren't Black enough. And for the white people, they weren't white enough.
No, absolutely. They definitely have experiences. Like, this is true. Some of the debates that I've heard come up talk about, should mixed people have their own spaces? That's like a whole nother subject, I read a book about, let me go back. Let me just finish that thought. Because there's a such thing as light skin privilege, as you realized when you worked for that hotel, right?
Right.
That is real. That is true, right? Mm-hmm. I find myself being more focused on this as we go along, but I'm not. As a dark-skinned woman who has experienced a lot of really harsh, terrible things because of my complexion,
right?
I'm sensitive to it. I'm sensitive to it. So I believe that everybody has had their issues. I dated a guy who was very fair complected, and he was just an angry person. But he was, he would talk about how badly he was treated by other Black kids because he was light skinned. Yeah, okay. And I was treated badly because I was dark, right? Boys at Parkway North High School, St. Louis, commenting on my complexion. Yeah. Commenting on my complexion because I'm dark skinned, and like, dude, you were like the same color, right? But you know what time we grew up in, like how it was in the 90s. So,
and isn't it funny how probably every one of those guys that said little side comments and everything else, now that we're grown, they're like, I always liked you.
Yeah, of course. But, I've definitely had that happen a few times. But, I was reading this book called The Vanishing Half. I don't know if you've heard of it. Mm-hmm. It was really, really good, but it was about these twins who were white passing, and they were in a town, and I don't know how true this is. I haven't researched this, but it was like a historical fiction story. So I'm sure there were towns like this, but it wasn't on the map, but it was a town where people who were that light skinned and white passing, but weren't white, went because they were treated so badly by Black people, not accepted by white people. So yes, we all have our struggles, and I don't want to discount the struggle of anyone because I'm only walking in my skin. I don't know what it feels like to be a light-skinned African American person or a mixed person. I have no idea. So these are definitely true facts. But it was an interesting question when my friend asked me. It's just like, I don't know if I'm coffee. I just really didn't answer, right? Because I feel like we get enough of that in the media
For
where,
sure.
where we have the black role filled by some very light skinned mixed person that I don't feel represents me, right? But they were cast because they were light skinned and, biracial or whatever and more palatable to those they feel, white people or black people or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll see. And, as things progress, who I'll have on or whatever. I'm not, you know,
Yeah,
saying I'm not going to have.
you constantly trying to fit into a certain, stereotype. And pay attention to commercials. I've
Yeah.
always loved commercials. I watch commercials. Commercials tell you how society, you know what I'm saying, is putting us in subcategories. Any commercial that you see, watch how the black person is depicted. If it's a child, I promise you they are going to have some sort of, kinky curly hair. Same thing, the black woman is going to have like some braids or some natural or something like that. You will never, you know what I'm saying? Like the commercial, you don't never see just a black boy just have like a natural box or, tapered, faded cut or something like that. And you don't usually see the woman, you know what I'm saying? She doesn't have like uh, straight hair or permed hair. And when they show the blended family, that's how it is. It'll be straight lace white man, but the mixed child has that, kinky curly hair and stuff like that. And it's like, really? You know?
Yeah, it'll be like two dark skinned black parents, but the kid, there's no way a product of those two individuals.
For sure.
As somebody who used to work in advertising and who
Oh,
used
that's
to
right. Yes.
work
Yeah.
on casting these people in commercials. I remember when I was working on, I think it was Pepsi, it was Mountain Dew back in the day. And, the direction from the client was they wanted, a white guy. We were working on March Madness, and they wanted a white guy and they wanted a black guy, but like an unambiguous, or ambiguous. I get this confused, but they wanted a black guy who looked mixed, but they didn't want him to be black black. They wanted to that was the direction. And a lot of times they will give that direction. That's the direction. I mean, I worked on a hair care company one time, and I remember we were shooting. It was for a relaxer, and we were shooting. It was a new company that was coming out. We were shooting, and they chose this girl, and I'm just like, why would y'all choose her? This girl over here actually has real hair. But they chose some girl with some weave all down her back, and we ended up having to like reshoot it because it wasn't right. But they just cast nothing you see can be believed, right? I feel like in advertising even now, there's always a mixed couple. It's like those people don't even look like they go together. Like you could be mixed, but come on, or I think everybody's just, I feel like advertising and brands are they try too hard when it comes to advertising. Advertising has definitely changed.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yes.
So, but yeah, being a part of a lot of that stuff it's interesting, the conversations behind the scenes when you're casting for those people. But
Yeah.
winding it back to where we started, Cheryl, for those of young black women who want to go into the medical profession, who are interested in nursing, because nursing is like so vast. There's so many levels of nurse.
It is.
I don't even know all of the acronyms or the credentials. I know there's what LNRNs, practitioner, like all the things. But for those young women who are interested in becoming a nurse and going into the profession as black women, what would you recommend to them that's encouraging, as a black woman, and things to kind of look out for?
I think just not just in nursing, but in general, I believe, and I would always tell younger people or older people, because you never know where a person is in where they are on their journey in life. As Black people, we have to realize that we are enough, you know, and you cannot be swayed by the stereotypes or the preconceived notions and everything else. You just have to show up. I would like to encourage people to, try to change the narrative, but not everybody is there. You know what I'm saying? Not everybody wants to be the poster child. Not everybody wants to be the leader or stuff like that. And, that has to come natural to you. So where I always try to take the position of representing us well, and I want to see us represented well, when I see, youth that are uncultured, I guess that's the best way that I can say it nicely, you know what I'm saying? Or they haven't had a good example of how to represent themselves. And I think that they are doing themselves a disjustice by being too ethnic, in a professional space. I always like to tell them that I have no problem with your eccentricities, you know what I'm saying, or your ethnicity, or you being proudly bold or everything else. But you have to be able to read the room,
So it's opening up in the nursing field. Do you feel like it's opening up? Like there's, because you talked about, and the Crown Act and hair and things like that, and obviously you can't coming into a profession with maybe locks that are, what do they call them when they're not they're kind of freestyle. What do they call that?
Like wicks or Rastafarian type locks. Yeah, where they're not they're free form. You know what I'm saying? And so
free form.
Exactly. And it's more of the hair, sort of clumped together, and stuff like that. And it's not, intricately patterned and stuff like that. Yeah. Just know,
right.
Come into every situation with your eyes wide open. You know what I'm saying? We are still, and to be honest, I feel like just like in society, we're moving backward. We have come, far, and, like you could get jobs. Whereas, like I said, when I, years ago, when I first started growing my locks, you know what I'm saying? And so this was probably like 2006, 2007, even though that was almost 20 years ago, doesn't seem like it, where in order for me to be considered, I felt like I had to get the job first before I could show my natural hair. You know what I'm saying? I would wear a wig, and I also think that I benefited from because of the way that my hair is styled, because a lot of times they don't know that they're locks. If I have it up in a French roll, or depending on what particular style I have, they don't know what it is. You know what I'm saying? Or they can't see the individual locks. And then when, once I have the job and I have entered the door, you know what I'm saying, I feel more comfortable being, myself. So you still have to do that. Because of the LGBTQ, plus community, you don't see them making determinations on, hair color anymore, because, that's how that fight started, where they used to tell us, oh, you can't have, blonde hair, you can't have auburn hair and everything else. When the LGBTQ community came in and they were hiring them and they had rainbow hair, you know what I'm saying, or things like that. We had to advocate for ourselves. It's like, oh, really? You say that this is an unnatural color for me, but, she can come in with pink hair or she can come in with green hair, or, like that. So we don't see too much of that anymore. But you see, this administration is trying to tear down all of those milestones that we had overcome. Not just for people of color, but, those marginalized different communities, LGBTQ, you know what I'm saying? Black people and everything else. They are tearing it down at the, I guess, the legislation first, so that when we do have issues, we don't have any legal way of fighting it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you have to be mindful of the contract that you're opening. Read your contracts. Read the policy and procedures. You know what I'm saying? The policy and procedure manual is your Bible. It's your weapon. You know what I'm saying? Come to work with your weapon. You know what I'm saying? So if you meet any pushback, that's where you start. You know what I'm saying? Read the fine print. Know, what you entered into when you signed that contract.
Are there still maybe little clauses ever hidden in when it comes to like natural hair or hair?
Yes.
That's just
absolutely
okay.
Absolutely. And they'll hit you upside the head. Oh, well, it's our policy. You know what I'm saying? And if you didn't read, it doesn't matter what, like I said, like if it's a Crown Act, but you accepted the job and accept the position, especially if it's a private organization, they have the right to say, how they want their company represented. If they tell you, just like we have to wear a certain color scrub based on our profession, nurses are in this color, CNAs or techs are in this color, respiratory is in this color, they still reserve the right. I could, have blue scrubs, but because there's so many different makers of blue scrubs, some of these ladies, especially now, they like the more form fitting or something like that. If they feel like it's too over sexualized and everything else, yes, they'll say, well, it's blue. You know what I'm saying? It's a scrub and everything else. If that job tells you you cannot wear that scrub set, you know what I'm saying, because of this, because of that, they reserve the right to say that.
Yeah. I think this generation coming up is a lot different when it comes to attire in the workplace. I mean,
absolutely.
Scrubs are different than they used to be back in the day. I mean, I guess you can have sexy, tight scrubs.
Oh, my God. Yeah. And some of them, the low rise, pants and stuff like that. Yeah. But if every time you bend over, you know what I'm saying, we can see your thong. You know what I'm saying? Or we can see, you know what I'm saying, the crack of your derriere. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You cannot wear these scrubs. You know what I'm saying? Or either you have to wear some sort of something so when you bend over, when that we're not seeing skin and stuff like that.
Right.
So, yeah, they reserve the right to, see, because you're a representation. That's another thing in nursing that they always, first thing they teach you, like when I go to lunch, if I leave the building, you take your badge off. If I go to a store or represent, or something like that, and let's say you never know, life happens. I get into an altercation with somebody, whatever, and somebody's filming it or somebody, gets caught on camera and you have something that says their business on it. Your badge is on there and it's saying, Barnes Hospital or whatever, St. Mary's Hospital, stuff like that. You could lose your job.
Yeah.
Because it's pointing.
That's a big one.
Yeah, it's pointing back to them. So you have to, you have to know your audience, but don't let all of the hoops and hurdles deter you from going into any profession, not just nursing, everything else. But, you are enough, and you go in, you put your best foot forward, you know what I'm saying? You build your skill set and everything else, and you'll find your place. You know what I'm saying? And again, you might have to, how should I say? You might have to dial back some things, you know what I'm saying? Because just think, before you can change, you have to at least be invited in. You do what you have to do to get in. And then once you get in, you know what I'm saying, then you try to change the culture from within.
I get it. Yeah. And that's true. You can't just come in trying to,
Right.
you know.
You got to get in the door first. You know what I'm saying? Once you get in the door, then, you know, you can try to stay there. But if you know, you can't bring, you know, your true authentic self, you know what I'm saying, sometimes, because you are always at the liberty of somebody's opinion. You know what I'm saying? Whoever is interviewing you, you know, something like that, you know, they might be representing the company, but when it boils down to it, you know what I'm saying, it's their opinion. You know what I'm saying? It's them. It's not necessary. So you don't let it be
your work face.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
Same thing, you know, with the tattoos and body art and stuff like that, you know. It's more recognized and allowed in the workplace now. You know, I see nurses and doctors with sleeves, you know what I'm saying, and tattoos all over their hand and stuff like that. You know, 15
So
years,
that shouldn't deter you. That shouldn't deter you if
No.
you've got tattoos and things like that. That's good. That's good.
no, but I would tell you, if you go into an interview, if you can't cover it, I would.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
I do see a lot of people with the scrubs on and then like a long sleeve under the scrub. I see that a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's why. Maybe it's cold. It's always cold in hospitals
It
too.
is.
Maybe that's why too.
It is.
Yeah.
You know, it could be. I think moreover, and then it's also, what type of tattoo do you have? You know.
Well, and I think the young people just need to think about what career, because everybody's not going to be internet famous, guys. So like, you're going to have to go out here and get a job. And yes, the world is opening up as far as being accepting of some of these things. But if we're not there yet, we're not there yet. So before you get your forehead tattooed or whatever, or your neck all the way up there, maybe just take that into consideration.
Yeah. Are you going to be a business entrepreneur? You know what I'm saying? You know, because again, when you work for somebody else, you are representing their brand.
Yeah.
You know, you are going to either make the money or cost the money. So if you are the face, you know, is how you're speaking, how your personality, all of that. Is it going to welcome people, or is it going to deter them from wanting to do business? You have to think about that.
No, that's real. Well, Cheryl, I really, really want to thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been your coffee no cream moment. I loved it. I mean, I'm just like, yo, that is not what you're gonna say. What?
Right.
And it's funny too, because it was kind of like, okay, yeah, I'm not offended. Okay, there's nothing else to really say about that. Because that is just not the direction I thought it was going to go. But we did get some good conversation out of it, really did. So I'm so glad you agreed to come on. And so tell the people where they can find you if they want to reach out to you, if you want to share your socials or anything like that. Where can they find you?
You know, I am on Facebook, and I'm Sheryl Davis on Facebook, and I'm new to Instagram, but I am on there, and I'm Sheryl Davis on Instagram. I'm still learning. I'm a work in progress. I'm dating myself with social.
You're new to Instagram?
Yes, I'm on Instagram. I'm still learning how to navigate it.
Really? But new?
Huh?
Interesting. I'm like, interesting. You're new on there?
Yeah, and I'm newly, I think, using it. You know, I opened it up, but again, I didn't know how to post, and then you can link it to your Facebook so that when you post one thing, it goes that I'm learning. You know what I'm saying? I'm not that into the social media and stuff like that.
Yeah, I know. It's best.
I hate this. Right. I feel so old saying that.
No, because people got off of that, and TikTok is my kryptonite. Honestly, I will
And you see, I'm still calling it
lose.
Facebook, and it's not Facebook anymore.
Oh, what is it?
Isn't it X or something? Didn't he
No,
think?
that's Twitter. See, y'all, Cheryl really isn't. Twitter is X. Facebook is Facebook.
Oh, I thought they changed
Instagram
the
is
name of
Instagram.
Facebook. Yeah.
No, Twitter is X. That's Elon. And then Facebook. Oh, Facebook is Meta.
There
That's
you
what you're
go.
thinking of.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But
Exactly.
I never say. I know. I mean, actually, I'm looking at my app right now, and it says Facebook. I mean, I don't think anybody really jumped on
Okay.
that.
Well, at least that
So
makes me feel
yeah.
better. So I'm not that antiquated.
No, it's Meta. But is anybody saying that? Like the Twitter app at least says X now. People say X. But
Okay.
anyway, so people can find you, Sheryl Davis, Cheryl, not Cheryl, and they can find you and say hello or message you or whatever they want to do if they want to
Yes.
talk about.
And I
Yes,
should go further to say that I am Cheryl with an S, not a C.
SH.
Yes, I'm
It
Cheryl
will
with
be
an
on the
S.
screen. I'll put it on the screen. They're gonna see. Cheryl. Yes.
Cheryl
Well,
or
Cheryl,
Cheryl with an S.
not a CH.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
don't know
The
who that
black
person
Cheryl.
is. That's right. Yes. But
Well, Cheryl,
I
thank
love
you.
your podcast. It is really engaging. It's enlightening. It's informing. You know what I'm saying? Doing amazing things. You know what I'm saying? But again, you know what you mean to me. You know,
Thank you.
I just so proud to, say that's my friend.
Cheryl's so good that way. She's always been that good. I half the time I have to believe her. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, she's serious, but she's great. I mean, you just such a kind soul, such a genuinely beautiful person, like inside and out, just so warm. And yes, so I appreciate it. And
Thank you. I
yeah,
appreciate that. That's, I
yeah.
hope that that's what people see and feel around me.
Oh yeah,
That
and she gives
that's
the
the
best
legacy I want to
hugs.
leave. Yeah. I love it
She
when
gives a
people say, Cheryl, you haven't changed. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, no, I'm true. If I love you, I'm going to tell you that I love you. You know what I'm saying? While you still around to hear it. I want you to feel that love and feel my genuineness every time that we get together and see each other.
She's been 65 since we've known each other, and she gives the best hugs. The best hugs. She's
Yes.
a good
Yes. I want you to feel the
hugger.
love. I don't want no fake hug. You know what I'm saying? Yes.
No,
I get as much out of it as I give. Yes. You know what I'm saying? We
she
have to
she
love on each other, support each other, uplift each other and everything. Yeah.
she must, because she gives some good hugs. All right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you guys in the next episode.